The lights inside Brew and Branch had long since dimmed, but the air still carried a tension that refused to leave. A janitor, ordinary in appearance, pushed his mop across the polished floor. To anyone watching, he looked like just another worker finishing the night shift. But this man wasn't who he seemed. He was Jackson Reeves, the CEO of the very company he had built from the ground up, disguised, unnoticed, and watching. For 3 nights, he had observed the cafe in silence. Something didn't add up. Sales were perfect on paper, yet whispers of missing hours, exhausted staff, and unexplained turnover haunted his reports. His executives laughed it off, but his instincts told him otherwise. And so here he was, hidden in plain sight, searching for a truth that spreadsheets couldn't reveal. Then he saw her. Sophie Lynn. A barista whose quiet grace seemed to hold the store together. She moved with purpose, soothed frustrated customers, and even remembered the smallest details of regulars' lives. But it wasn't during the day that Sophie caught his attention. It was after closing. When everyone else had left, she lingered, unlocking the office, kneeling before a drawer, and slipping something into an envelope. Her expression wasn't greedy. It was pained. Determined. That was the moment Jackson knew something was terribly wrong. What secret was Sophie hiding? And why did it feel less like theft and more like a desperate act of survival? The boss had gone undercover seeking answers, but what he found was a mystery far darker than he imagined. Jackson Reeves had not always been a CEO. 12 years earlier, he was just a man with a beat-up food truck, a risky loan, and an idea that no bank believed in. Every cup poured with purpose wasn't just a slogan. It was the reason he mortgaged his condo and worked 16-hour days, rain or shine. From those beginnings grew Brew and Branch, a thriving coffee chain with 37 locations across the state. To his investors and board members, Jackson was a success story. But behind the polished headquarters and glowing reports, he felt the brand slipping away from its roots. Brew and Branch was supposed to be about community, yet too many surveys, too many complaints from staff whispered of something rotten beneath the surface. At location number 14, the South Congress Cafe in Austin, the numbers looked perfect, but the atmosphere felt poisoned. The only way to know the truth was to vanish into it. And so, for the first time in years, Jackson stripped himself of his tailored suits and took on a disguise, a janitor's uniform bought for $24.99. With a faded name tag reading Cam, he became invisible. Nobody looked twice at a janitor. Nobody suspected the man pushing the mop was their boss. In those first days, Jackson learned more than he had in months of board meetings. The manager, Travis Kent, wore his authority like a weapon. Charming to influencers and attractive customers, dismissive to everyone else. He handed out breaks like favors, punished staff with split shifts, and smiled only when it benefited him. Employees laughed nervously at his jokes, afraid to step out of line. And then there was Sophie Lynn. Sophie wasn't flashy. Late 20s, hair tied neatly back, a barista apron tied snug around her waist. She didn't gossip in the break room or waste time scrolling her phone. She noticed things: the anxious customer juggling a toddler, the elderly man who sat at the same window seat every afternoon, the new hire struggling with the espresso machine. She moved through the cafe not like an employee doing a job, but like someone protecting a home. Her co-workers seemed to sense it, too. They leaned on her in quiet ways. A glance in her direction when the line stretched out the door. A sigh of relief when she stepped forward to handle a difficult customer. They called her a guardian angel, half joking, but Jackson could see it was true. She held the place together in ways no profit report could ever capture. At first, Jackson thought that was all there was to it. Sophie was simply a good worker, the kind of person every company needed. But then he noticed her after closing. When the cafe emptied and Travis disappeared into his shiny BMW, Sophie stayed behind. She cleaned corners no one would check. She double-checked the espresso pressure. And then she slipped into the manager's office with a small key. Curiosity gnawed at Jackson. He lingered near the hallway, listening to the faint click of a drawer unlocking. Through a sliver in the door, he saw her kneel, withdraw an envelope, study it for a moment, then place it carefully inside her bag. Her face was unreadable, tired, sad, determined. That single image haunted him. Who was Sophie helping? Why risk everything in secret? She didn't look like a thief, and she certainly wasn't careless. If anything, her actions were reverent, as though she was safeguarding something that mattered far more than money. Jackson had come undercover searching for mismanagement. But what he stumbled upon was something else entirely. A mystery buried in envelopes, hidden drawers, and the quiet resolve of a barista who refused to look away. And deep inside, Jackson knew, whatever Sophie was doing, it would change everything. For days, Jackson kept his disguise, pushing his mop across the floor, all the while watching Sophie's routine. The same drawer, the same envelopes, the same quiet determination. And then, one night, curiosity overcame restraint. When Sophie left, Jackson slipped into the office, picked the lock with a paperclip, and opened the bottom drawer. What he found stunned him. Dozens of envelopes, each neatly labeled, Maria V. Week 12. Week 13. Week 14. Inside was cash. Not company money, but small bills, 1s and 5s, the kind he'd seen dropped into Sophie's daisy-painted tip jar. She wasn't stealing. She was saving. The name struck him, Maria V. Who was she? And why was Sophie risking everything to keep her afloat? The next morning, Jackson dug deeper, using his CEO override access from his laptop. Within minutes, he uncovered the truth. Maria Velasquez, a former shift lead, had been terminated 3 months earlier. The official reason, cash handling violation. But the records didn't add up. No severance, no proper HR closure, and a suspiciously missing paycheck. Buried deep in the system, he found something darker. A complaint Maria had filed against the manager, Travis Kent, accusing him of manipulating schedules to cheat employees out of benefits. The complaint had never reached corporate. Travis had stopped it. And just days later, Maria had been accused of theft and fired. It was retaliation. Jackson clenched his jaw. Maria hadn't just lost her job. She had a son, Lucas, depending on her. She'd written a desperate resignation letter, never sent, pleading that she didn't know how she would survive. It wasn't just an HR failure. It was cruelty. Now it all made sense. Sophie had seen it happen. She had witnessed Maria's life unravel. And instead of looking away, she had quietly taken on the burden herself, collecting her own tip money, week after week, hiding it in envelopes, and delivering groceries to Maria's door. But Travis wasn't finished. His suspicion had shifted. If Maria had once threatened him, now Sophie was the target. Jackson watched the shift in real time. The subtle punishments began. Sophie's station mysteriously missing supplies. Her shifts rescheduled into impossible hours. Open at 5:30 a.m., close at 11 p.m. A batch of cold brew dumped out because Travis claimed it tasted bitter. Her locker inspected without reason. And then, the cruelest blow, her paycheck simply didn't arrive. When Sophie asked, Travis smirked. Weird. Must have gotten lost in the mail. Jackson's blood boiled. That night, he broke protocol. Logging into the emergency payroll system, he issued Sophie's check himself, adding a 15% adjustment. It wasn't about the money. It was about reminding her that she wasn't invisible. But Travis wasn't done playing his game. He grew more aggressive, cornering Sophie in front of staff, accusing her of gunning for his job, mocking her late-night errands, and sneering about her little charity projects. His words cut sharp enough to draw the cafe's attention. And then came the moment Sophie snapped. In front of her co-workers and customers, she raised her voice, steady but furious. Enough. Maria didn't steal. You framed her because she caught you skimming the register. You manipulated schedules. You buried her complaint. And now you're doing it to me. The room froze. For the first time, Travis paled. He hissed back, you can't prove anything. But Sophie's reply was ice cold, I can. And I will. The cafe was silent, every employee watching. But before Sophie could open that drawer, before she could reveal everything, Travis grabbed her arm, trying to stop her. You open that drawer, you're finished. And Jackson knew. This was no longer about disguise or patience. The conflict had reached its breaking point, and if he stayed silent any longer, Sophie would pay the price. The cafe stood still. Every hiss of the espresso machine, every clink of ceramic mugs, Even the low hum of indie music faded into silence. Sophie's arm was still in Travis's grip, her eyes blazing with defiance. Around them, staff and customers stared, caught between shock and fear. Jackson couldn't wait any longer. He stepped forward, laying his mop aside. His voice was steady, quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "Let her go." Travis froze, confused by the janitor's sudden boldness. He scoffed. "Stay out of this, Cam. You don't know what's going on here." But Jackson didn't move aside. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a black leather ID holder, and flipped it open. The gold-embossed crest of Brew and Branch shimmered under the fluorescent lights. "My name isn't Cam," he said, locking eyes with Sophie first, then the rest of the stunned staff. "I'm Jackson Reeves, CEO of Brew and Branch." Gasps rippled across the cafe. Baristas exchanged wide-eyed looks, and even customers leaned closer, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Sophie's lips parted, her fury giving way to disbelief. Travis's smirk vanished, the color draining from his face. This is some kind of joke," he stammered. Jackson's voice was calm but unyielding. "I didn't come here for a show, Travis. I came because something was wrong in this store. And I found it." At that moment, the district manager, Derek Coleman, entered, summoned by the silent message Jackson had sent an hour earlier. The timing was deliberate. Derek, equally shocked, handed Jackson the master key without question. Jackson walked past Travis, who tried to bluster, "If I'd known you were coming, I would've." "That's exactly the problem," Jackson cut in sharply. "You'd have performed. Put on a smile, staged your store, and hidden the truth. That's why I came undercover, because I needed to see what this place really was when you thought no one was watching." He knelt at the filing cabinet, slid the master key into the bottom drawer, and opened it. The sound of the lock giving way echoed like a verdict. Slowly, he lifted out a thick manila folder, receipts, shift schedules, annotated reports, and dozens of envelopes labeled with Maria's name. "This," Jackson said, spreading the documents across the desk for all to see, "is what integrity looks like." The staff crowded closer. Pages revealed voided transactions lining up perfectly with Travis's shifts, schedules manipulated to deny benefits, statements from employees who had quietly quit without explanation. On top lay the envelopes, Sophie's quiet rebellion, her tip money turned into lifelines. Jackson's voice sharpened. Maria Velasquez didn't steal a thing. She was framed. And Sophie Lynn, he turned, meeting her stunned eyes, has been risking her own livelihood to support her and her son, documenting everything you tried to bury. Travis sputtered, trying to regain control. You can't prove." Jackson cut him off again, this time pulling out one final sheet. A letter Maria had written but never sent, saved in her employee profile. In it, she detailed exactly how Travis voided sales, pocketed the cash, and blamed her for the shortfall. The room erupted in whispers. Employees shook their heads, disgust and anger flashing across their faces. Even the customers could see there was no escape. Jackson straightened, his voice clear, final. "Travis Kent, you're terminated. Effective immediately." Derek stepped forward, firm and professional. "I'll escort him out. His system access will be locked today." For a moment, Travis looked like he might fight back. But surrounded by witnesses, with every lie exposed, he had no ground left to stand on. His shoulders sagged. Without another word, he collected his things and walked out the door he had once ruled. Silence lingered in his absence. Then Jackson turned back to the staff, his expression heavy. "I owe each of you an apology. Brew and Branch failed you. I failed you. You should never have needed Sophie to do the work that our systems were supposed to protect. That ends today." The baristas exchanged glances, unsure what to say. But one thing was clear. The truth had finally been unlocked, and nothing would ever be the same again. The cafe remained in stunned silence long after Travis was escorted out. The baristas stood clustered together, their faces a mix of disbelief and relief, while customers whispered among themselves, realizing they had just witnessed the unmasking of something far bigger than bad management. Jackson let the silence breathe before speaking again. His voice carried not the authority of a CEO, but the weight of a man who had seen the cracks in his own creation. "From this moment forward," he said firmly, "this store will be audited. Every hour denied, every paycheck delayed, every benefit stripped away will be restored. You deserve more than apologies. You deserve justice." Some employees nodded cautiously, others simply stared, but the message landed. The culture of fear was gone. For the first time, they felt seen. Then Jackson turned to Sophie. The barista who had risked everything now stood frozen, her hands still trembling from the confrontation. He approached her quietly. "You carried the weight my system should have carried," he said. "You protected the people I failed to protect." Sophie shook her head. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because Maria lost everything. Someone had to help." Jackson paused. "Then tell me what you want. A raise? A promotion? A management position? You've more than earned it." But Sophie's answer was simple. "I don't want a title. I want Maria rehired, with back pay. And I want to make sure what happened here never happens again." Her words cut deeper than any demand for advancement could. Jackson nodded slowly. "Done. I'll call her myself." That night, Maria Velasquez received the call she never expected. Her voice broke when Jackson explained that her job, her wages, and her dignity would be restored. Tears of gratitude spilled through the line, not for herself alone, but for Lucas, the son she had feared she could no longer provide for. Weeks turned into months. Travis's shadow disappeared from the cafe, and the store itself began to transform. Shifts were scheduled fairly. Staff felt empowered to speak without fear. Customers sensed the change too, returning not just for coffee but for the warmth of a place finally true to its purpose. But the ripple didn't stop there. At headquarters, Jackson spearheaded reforms inspired directly by Sophie's courage. A new employee advocacy program was born. Anonymous reporting lines bypassed local managers. Surprise visits from corporate prevented staged performances. Councils of employees were given direct access to HR. And most importantly, no termination could move forward without a multi-level review. 6 months later, at Brew and Branch's downtown headquarters, Jackson stood beside Sophie as they introduced the program to regional managers. Gone were the sterile walls and cold artwork. In their place were cafe-style spaces where corporate staff and baristas mingled as equals. Sophie, no longer in an apron but in a modest blazer, stood before the room and spoke with calm conviction. "This isn't about punishment. It's about protection. It's about making sure no one will ever be silenced again for doing the right thing." Some managers shifted uncomfortably, others nodded in understanding. But all of them knew, the culture had shifted. A new standard had been set. Meanwhile, Maria began her new chapter. Restored with back pay and placed in a district training role, she regained not only stability but pride. Lucas, her young son, thrived. His drawings filled the walls of their newly renovated apartment building, a building quietly purchased and improved by Brew and Branch to ensure affordable housing for its tenants. When Jackson visited, Lucas peeked out from behind his mother, clutching a toy dinosaur. "Are you the coffee man?" he asked with childlike wonder. Jackson chuckled. "Yes, I guess I am." But deep down, he knew he had become something else too. Not just a businessman, but a leader reminded of what true leadership meant. Not profits, not expansion, but people. For Jackson, for Sophie, for Maria, and for every employee who had ever felt invisible, the aftermath wasn't just a victory. It was a beginning. The storm had passed, but what remained was stronger than before, a company rebuilt on truth, fairness, and the courage of those who refused to stay silent. Some stories end with numbers on a balance sheet. This one ends with something harder to measure. Dignity restored, trust rebuilt, and voices finally heard. Sophie never wanted power. She wanted justice. Maria never asked for charity. She wanted fairness. And Jackson, a man who thought he understood leadership, discovered that the greatest leaders are not the ones who speak the loudest, but the ones who choose to listen. The cafe drawer that once hid quiet envelopes of tip money became a symbol of something far greater, the courage to protect what systems overlook, and the truth that silence is never the answer. Every company, Every workplace has a drawer. A place where injustice hides until someone is brave enough to open it. Sophie opened hers. Jackson followed. And lives changed because of it. Now the question becomes, what about you? Have you ever worked in a place where you felt invisible? Where no one noticed the extra effort, or where speaking up felt dangerous? Did someone step in and protect you, or were you left to fight alone? Share your story in the comments. Let others know they're not alone. And if you believe courage and integrity still matter in this world, follow this channel for more real undercover stories that reveal the human side of business. Because sometimes the smallest act of bravery, a word spoken, a truth uncovered, a drawer opened, can change everything.